A confession of disordered loves. On false worship, humiliation, authorship, rage, and the places I asked creation to do what only God can do. By Elias Winter. April 20th, 2026. Read by an automated voice. 1. Before I explain myself. Lord, before I explain myself, let me say plainly that I am not innocent. I have been wounded, yes. I have been lonely, misread, underheld, overtired, and hungry for forms of mercy I did not know how to ask for cleanly. I have lived in exile from many things at once. From nations, from fathers, from stable belonging, from the ordinary ease by which other men seem to move through their days without needing everything to become either revelation or threat. All of that may be true, but it is not the truth that saves. It is only the truth that tempts a man to begin speaking about himself in the passive voice, as if he were merely the site where injuries occurred. I do not come now to speak in the passive voice. I come to confess that I have loved wrongly. I have wanted created things with a desperation fit only for God. I have asked bodies, words, praise, work, intensity, humiliation, and chemical consolation to perform acts of resurrection they were never made to perform. I have been angry not only because I was wronged, but because I wanted my idols to work better than they did. I have despised the false while still kneeling before forms of false consolation, more elegant than the common ones. I have wanted to be absolved without being emptied, reordered without being humbled, saved without surrender. I am tired of speaking about my life only as pattern, psychology, and structure. Those things may be real, but they are not high enough. The deeper reality is simpler and more terrible. I have loved many things too much, and you too little. I have sought peace in places that could only intensify the war. I have asked relief to do the work of redemption. I have called this complexity when often it was idolatry. So let this not be an essay of explanation. Let it be confession. Not because I enjoy accusation against myself, nor because self-contempt is a kind of holiness, but because I am beginning to suspect that what I call depth was sometimes only distance from obedience. I have known how to diagnose. I have not always known how to kneel. Receive, then, what I say here not as performance, but as witness against myself. And if even now some vanity remains in the shaping of the sentences, let that too be part of the confession. I still want to sound true before I fully become true. I still want beauty in the language before I have consented to beauty in the soul. I still want to be known as the one who sees. But tonight, I ask for something harder than being seen. I ask to be judged truly, and not destroyed. 2. I have asked created things to save me. The first truth is not that I have sinned in many different ways. The first truth is that the sins have all bent toward one hidden request. Save me. Save me from the flatness of ordinary time. Save me from the humiliation of being one more man among millions whose gifts do not guarantee love. Save me from the terror that my life might remain structurally unspectacular, morally unfinished, erotically unresolved, and still require faithfulness. Save me from the loneliness of having a mind that sees too much and a body that still wants to be held. Save me from the ache of not being recognized in proportion to what I feel I carry. Save me from the childlike terror that if I am not distinctly seen, then I am not fully real. And because I did not know how to bring this plea cleanly to you, I brought it elsewhere. I brought it to work. Let this company, this title, this new role, this number on the paycheck, this institutional placement be the place where things finally align. Let this be the world's apology for earlier disorder. Let authority come not only as responsibility, but as public recognition. Let my contribution and my name remain joined. Let the structure around me finally reward substance instead of narrative theft. Let this job become more than labor. Let it become vindication. I brought it to beauty. Let this body, this man, this face, this scent, this calm masculine confidence, this proximity to embodied ease, let it make me feel for 1 hour what the rest of life has not made me feel in years. Chosen, quiet, beneath something solid, relieved of interpretation, released from the burden of being the one who must always understand. I brought it to language. Let the sentence save me. Let the essay reconcile the contradictions by giving them form. Let authorship be stronger than shame. Let if I cannot be healed, then at least let me be exact. Let accuracy itself become a form of absolution. Let the right naming of things place me under a law more trustworthy than the bad catechisms of ordinary social life. I brought it to artificial forms of brightness. Let chemistry do what prayer has not yet done. Let the body be delivered before the soul consents. Let the world become bearable by alteration, if not by redemption. Let fire enter the bloodstream where grace has not yet entered the will. This is what idolatry is. Not crude superstition, but displaced urgency. Not merely loving bad things, but asking finite things for infinite work. The idol is not whatever gives pleasure. The idol is whatever one addresses with the desperation proper only to God. I did not merely enjoy what was created. I asked it to bear the weight of salvation. Then I grew furious when it buckled. 3. I loved intensity more than peace. This is hard to admit because intensity has often worn the clothing of aliveness. It has looked like heightened perception, unusual sincerity, erotic openness, intellectual seriousness, unwillingness to settle for the mediocre or the falsely reconciled. It has looked like refusal of dullness, refusal of cowardice, refusal of the half-dead social forms by which most people seem content to move through their lives. It has looked, at times, like truth itself. But intensity is not truth. It is often only voltage. And I have loved voltage. I have preferred what heightens to what steadies. I have preferred what floods to what forms. I have preferred ecstasy, panic, revelation, humiliation, urgency, idealization, rupture, collision, and the sharp edge of longing over the quiet continuities by which a life is actually kept. Peace has often seemed too small, too ordinary, too morally unimpressive. Intensity, by contrast, made me feel singular. It turned ordinary time into drama, ordinary desire into myth, ordinary injury into metaphysical significance. It made me feel chosen by extremity, and to be chosen by extremity felt close enough to being chosen by God that I did not always resist the confusion. But peace asks something intensity does not. Peace asks endurance without spectacle. Peace asks that one remain the same man in the morning as he was at night. Peace asks less theater and more obedience. Peace asks one to survive low-voltage hours without inventing an apocalypse to justify one's own emotional amplitude. Peace asks not merely that one feel deeply, but that one stay. I have not known how to stay. I have known how to ascend, how to collapse, how to narrate the ascent and the collapse, how to build a chapel out of my own states and light candles before them. I have known how to turn every surge into meaning and every drop into doom. But peace, the unremarkable, muscular, unspectacular peace by which a man keeps appointments, eats food, answers messages proportionally, sleeps, wakes, works, and does not ask each hour to disclose the fate of his soul. That peace has often felt beneath me, as though accepting it would mean relinquishing some secret grandeur in my suffering. So let me say what I have not wanted to say. I have sometimes preferred intensity, not because it was better, but because it made me feel exceptional. It kept me from the humiliation of being one ordinary creature among others, dependent on habits that no one will applaud. Intensity gave me drama when peace asked for fidelity. And because fidelity does not intoxicate, I often chose the hotter thing. The tragedy is not only that intensity destroyed me at times. The deeper tragedy is that I learned to mistake it for evidence of life. 4. I asked chemistry to make the world bearable. There were seasons when the world did not seem impossible exactly, only unbearably dim. The colors were technically present, but they did not strike with conviction. Human contact existed, but it did not seem to penetrate to the place where despair had set up its patient furniture. The future could be imagined, but not inhabited. The body could move, but without inward consent. One could survive, but survival had acquired the moral texture of a room with no windows. In that condition, I did what many men do under other names. I sought a counterfeit annunciation. I wanted something that would descend not as command but as immediate mercy. Something that would not argue with my shame but outrun it. Something that would not ask me to heal by degrees. Something that would not say, "Endure this narrowness and learn obedience," but would instead break open the walls, flood the nervous system with light, make the body say yes again, make conversation glow, make desire feel consecrated, make the future feel temporarily forgiven, make me more than tired and more than one more animal subject to history and collapse. I wanted an artificial Pentecost, and I received one, or what felt like one. Tongues of fire without holiness, energy without wisdom, confidence without peace, intimacy without covenant, resurrection without death. The nervous system lit from below and called it grace. The old sadness did not vanish, but it was overwhelmed, silenced by force, subordinated to a brighter tyrant. The ordinary world became charged again. Men became luminous. Ideas became magnetic. The self stopped feeling like dead weight and became instead a swift, over-articulated, over-desiring, over-believing thing that mistook acceleration for liberation. What I wanted from chemistry was not pleasure. Pleasure is too small a word. I wanted re-enchantment. I wanted to feel that the world was once again morally and erotically available. I wanted to be delivered from the insult of baseline existence. I wanted continuity of aliveness. I wanted not to descend. That is why the bargain was so terrible. Because the thing did, for a time, seem to answer the right question. It gave a form of false resurrection so persuasive that ordinary sobriety afterward seemed not like health but exile. One can recover from a hangover. One cannot easily recover from counterfeit transcendence. Because once the body learns that such intensity is possible, ordinary life begins to look not merely insufficient but false. Yet even this confession could become self-deception if I made chemistry the villain and myself merely its casualty. The deeper truth is harder. I wanted what it offered because I preferred immediate fire to slow purification. I preferred being altered to being remade. I preferred counterfeit consolation because it asked nothing from my pride except that I call it mercy. Lord, I did not only receive a false consolation. I sought it. I invited it where prayer felt too slow, where friendship felt too contingent, where ordinary time felt too poor to bear the weight of my longing. I asked the body to become a chapel and the bloodstream to become a liturgy. And when the light turned savage, when wakefulness became torment, when the charged world tipped into suspicion and false significance, and the mind crossed from overmeaning into terror, I learned too late that not every fire is holy, simply because it is bright. 5. I turned beauty into an altar. There are men whose bodies I have not merely desired. I have bowed before them. Not literally always, though sometimes nearly so, but inwardly, certainly. There have been moments in which a face, a chest, a neck, a pair of hands, the easy confidence of a body not at war with itself, the smell of skin or fabric or sweat, has become for me not merely erotic stimulus, but theological temptation. A beautiful man would stand before me, and I would not simply think, he is attractive. I would think, perhaps without words, here is rest. Here is hierarchy that calms me. Here is a body more at home in the world than mine. Here is something I can place myself beneath and thereby stop carrying, for 1 hour, the burden of selfhood. This is not ordinary lust, or rather, it is lust that has learned the language of veneration. I turned beauty into an altar because beauty seemed cleaner than pity. To be desired by beauty, to serve beauty, to be near beauty, to be physically arranged around a more embodied masculine confidence. All this could momentarily quiet something in me that argument could not touch. The attractive man was not just a man. He became symbol. He became Olympus, height, order, permission, answer. He became the one before whom I could stop being the analyst and become only the one who touched, admired, inhaled, lowered himself, softened. That is why the loss is always larger than the actual encounter. Because the encounter is not carrying only sex. It is carrying exile, longing, false worship, class resentment, bodily shame, the hunger to be chosen by what one has elevated above oneself, the ancient wish that proximity to beauty might absolve one from being ordinary. When the beautiful one leaves after an hour, he does not merely take his body with him. He takes the borrowed fantasy of reprieve. Then the room looks like a room again, and the self returns like a tax collector. I do not say this to condemn desire itself. Beauty is not the problem. Bodies are not the problem. The male form is not an embarrassment to holiness. But I did not stop at delight. I made the beautiful body do the work of God. I let embodied ease become moral superiority in my sight. I let muscular calm become something like spiritual legitimacy. I let erotic asymmetry become ontological hierarchy. And then I worshipped. Lord, I have used the language of reverence where gratitude would have been enough. I have turned admiration into kneeling. I have made of another creature a temporary god because I did not know how to stand before created beauty without either grasping or dissolving. This is not merely sexual excess. It is misordered adoration. 6. I sought rest through humiliation. I must speak carefully here, because there are things the world names too quickly and things the church names too lazily. But I know this much. I have not only wanted pleasure, I have wanted reduction. There are forms of erotic life in which I feel a strange peace, not because I am honored, but because I am lowered. To be beneath, to be used, to be objectified, to be called less than, to be made instrument, to surrender rank, to lose shape under another's appetite. These things have not always frightened me. At times they have relieved me. Why? Because a whole person is expensive to be. A whole person carries history, grief, talent, contradiction, moral expectation, future, authorship, sorrow, father hunger, nation hunger, and the humiliating responsibility of remaining a soul in time. To be reduced, even briefly, can feel like Sabbath from the burden of being a full self. This is the part no respectable language easily holds, because from outside it looks like degradation, and in some sense it is. But from inside it can feel like clarity. There is no ambiguity in an instrument. There is no existential question in an object. There is no need to narrate one's life while one is being used. To become less can feel like relief when one has been carrying too much. Here I must confess something darker still. I have not only tolerated humiliation, I have eroticized it. I have made ritual of my own reduction. What might have remained psychic wound became liturgy. Shame became script. Self-contempt became role. The body learned to respond not only to touch but to asymmetry itself, to worship, abasement, naming, lowering, the collapse of self-respect into arousal. That which would be unbearable in daylight became desirable under charge. I asked sex to convert humiliation into ecstasy and thereby spare me the harder work of healing the shame underneath. This is not because I truly believe my soul deserves contempt. Or perhaps that sentence is too easy. Let me say it more honestly. Some part of me has long suspected that contempt is closer to the truth than tenderness. So when contempt arrives in erotic form, I can receive it without the full devastation it would bring in ordinary life. It is as though I say, let me choose the wound this time. Let me make of it a scene. Let me call pleasure by the old name of harm, and harm by the old name of intimacy, and in that confusion perhaps remain sovereign enough not to die of it. Lord, I have sought rest through forms of diminishment that mimic peace without granting dignity. I have used desire to hide from the sorrow of being a self. I have let lowering become a portal where perhaps it should have remained only a warning. If there is mercy here, it is not that the longing was fake. The longing was real. I wanted to be relieved, enclosed, released from command. But I asked humiliation to do what only love rightly ordered can do. 7. I wanted to be held without having to remain whole. Beneath all the theater, there is a simpler ache. I wanted to be held, not in the generalized sentimental sense, not abstractly. I wanted specific things. A long embrace that lasted longer than social custom permits. My head against another body without the need to impress. The right to stop speaking and still be wanted. The peace of lying beside someone strong and beautiful, without the clock already beginning its countdown toward departure. The possibility that warmth could persist after intensity, that the body could remain near after the climax, that tenderness might exist without my having to earn it through brilliance or performance, or the extremity of my own longing. But I wanted to be held without remaining fully exposed as a person. That is the contradiction. Mutuality asks too much. It asks that I remain a whole self while being known. It asks patience, slowness, ordinary reciprocity, the endurance of uncertainty, the humility of not being exceptional in one's suffering, the willingness to let another person remain fully other and not be converted into rescue. That is harder than worship. Worship is simpler. Objectification is simpler. Transaction is simpler. Being used is simpler. There is less risk in becoming instrument than in being known and not adored. So I often sought forms of closeness that were physically intense but structurally temporary. Why? Because they let me touch tenderness without submitting to its full conditions. I could rest my head on a body, kiss the cheek, lower myself, breathe the scent, feel warmth, almost sleep. Yet all of this could happen inside a container that had not asked the more frightening question. Will I be held when I'm no longer new, no longer charged, no longer useful as a scene? This is why casual intensities hurt me more than they ought. Because I do not only grieve the person, I grieve the evaporating possibility that closeness could continue. I want continuation more than contact. I want duration more than peak. I want not to descend from the mountain. And when the body leaves after the charged hour, the nervous system reads the event not merely as conclusion but as exile. Then I am left to realize that what I wanted was not sex but shelter. Lord, I have wanted to be held without consenting to the long and frightening work by which a person becomes holdable in ordinary time. I have asked brief containers to bear lifelong needs. I have sought from strangers and transactions the sort of gentle steadfastness that belongs either to covenantal human love or to you. And because they could not give it, I called the world cruel when in fact I had misnamed the room. 8. I made shame into a ritual. There are sins one commits in haste, and there are sins one architects. Mine have often been architected. I do not mean that they were always premeditated in the legal sense. I mean they became patterned, stylized, given sequence and recurrence, wrapped in language, roles, timings, gestures, tones, self-namings, chosen humiliations, selected postures. In this way, shame ceased to be only what I felt afterward. It became part of the rite itself. One might say I sacramentalized my own diminishment. This is one of the strangest and saddest capacities of the fallen mind, to take what wounds it and turn it into form. There is a kind of genius in depravity, not because evil is creative in the highest sense, but because it is parasitic and knows how to imitate liturgy. Repetition, gestures, words of abasement, bodily signs, expected sequences, climax, collapse, aftermath. What is this if not the structure of ritual bent toward the wrong God? Not every repetition is sacred, but every ritualized repetition trains desire. I trained mine toward shame. I made ceremonies out of that which should have remained occasion for lament. I learned how to enter certain erotic scenes almost as one enters a chapel already knowing the order of service. There would be invocation, lowering, naming, adoration, intensity, loss of self-command, then completion, then the quiet after in which the room looked embarrassingly ordinary, and one had to reckon again with the fact that the sacrament had no God in it. I do not write this to dramatize. I write it because I want to name the mechanism. The shame did not merely accompany the act. It became one of its desired ingredients. The very thing that in ordinary life would have intensified my loneliness was, under charge, converted into evidence of aliveness. This is what makes sin so difficult to abandon. It does not only promise pleasure, it promises coherence. It tells the soul, here, at least, your contradictions make sense together. Lord, I have performed my wounds instead of surrendering them. I have mistaken repetition for mastery. I have built anti-sacraments and then wondered why they did not heal. I have returned to rituals that humiliate me because I feared a life in which no ritual at all would carry me. Better a false liturgy than naked time. That is what I chose again and again. But false liturgies do not remain harmless. They catechize. They teach the body what the soul secretly believes. They train me to accept asymmetry as truth, contempt as charge, temporary use as intimacy, collapse as climax. They do not remain in bed. They leak. They tell me in quieter hours that this is what I am for. This, too, I bring to confession. Not only the acts, but the architecture. Not only the shame, but the will that made shame ceremonial. 9. I wanted recognition more than faithfulness. There is a place where my moral seriousness becomes dangerous to me. The place where I no longer want simply to do the work faithfully, but to be seen in proportion to what I believe I have done. This desire is not trivial. It has roots. I know how easily authorship drifts in institutions. I know how often narrative attaches itself to the smoother person rather than the truer one. How often those who think deeply are compressed by those who present cleanly. How often work performed in the interior of the system is represented by someone standing closer to the light. I am not hallucinating this. It has happened. It still happens. But confession begins where truth about the structure becomes truth about the soul. The deeper problem is that I do not only want fairness, I want vindication. I want a world in which what is inwardly substantial is also outwardly acknowledged. I want authorship to remain attached to me because authorship feels perilously close to personhood. If my words, my models, my strategy, my labor can be narrated by another, then what remains that proves I was really there? Thus, the professional injury becomes metaphysical. Misattribution does not feel merely annoying. It feels annihilating. This is too much burden to place on recognition. I say this without denying the wrongs. There are thefts of narrative. There are weak men who stand on other men's substance. There are institutions that prefer smoother speech to truer labor. There are managers who want the benefit of one's intelligence without paying the political price of fully backing one's authority. All of this may be so. Yet even there, my own disorder remains. I have wanted the public attachment of my name to my work with a hunger that reveals how much I have asked work to tell me who I am. Faithfulness is quieter than recognition. It can exist without applause. It can survive partial blindness in the audience. It can remain itself even when another receives some of the visible layer. I do not say this to excuse theft, but to accuse my own desperation. Because I have often lived as if being unseen were equivalent to being unreal. That is not faithfulness. That is idolatry of recognition. Lord, I have wanted to be known correctly more than I have wanted to remain obedient under misrecognition. I have wanted the world to tell the truth about me before I have fully consented to the possibility that you already know it. I have turned labor into a referendum on my ontological placement. I have made authorship too close to salvation. Then, when people lied, compressed, bypassed, or narrated around me, I did not only become angry, I became spiritually unmoored. This reveals something humiliating. I still need witnesses too much. I still want men, managers, readers, institutions, and beautiful strangers to reassure me that I occupy my proper dimensions in reality. Faithfulness would continue even under partial erasure. I have not always known how to do that. 10. I judged harshly because I could smell cowardice. Some of my judgments have been right. That is part of the problem. I have often perceived cowardice, vanity, sponsored mediocrity, derivative authority, men who borrow legitimacy from institutions they confuse with truth, narrators who take possession of what they did not generate, executives who preserve ambiguity because ambiguity lets them remain central, scholars who mistake Western approval for universal judgment, fathers who turn weakness into cultivated sophistication. I have smelled fear beneath polish. I have seen softness dressed as refinement, deference disguised as complexity, spiritual hollowness sitting inside articulate language. And because I have often been right, I have grown less careful with my anger. I have allowed accurate perception to become permission. Permission for contempt. Permission for totalization. Permission to imagine that because I can smell the wound in another man's authority, I am therefore morally entitled to despise him whole. My judgments ceased to be diagnoses and became degradations. I looked at men and saw not merely pattern, but person condensed into flaw. I felt the pleasure of being the one who sees through them, and because seeing through them often relieved my own humiliation, I let judgment become appetite. There is a species of pride that thrives not on innocence but on superior diagnosis. It says, I know I am flawed, but at least I see. I know I am disordered, but at least I am not derivative. I know my own sins, but at least mine are not mediocre. This is a filthy refuge. It lets one remain morally inflated inside confession itself. And it is especially seductive for someone whose gifts are real. It is easy to become drunk on perception. Easy to think that because one can map the compromise, one is exempt from compromise. Easy to believe that naming cowardice is itself courage, when often it may only be intelligence sharpened by resentment. Lord, I have judged men not only because they were false, but because their falseness injured me. I have wanted them exposed, reduced, cut down to size. I have wanted the weak man with borrowed authority to feel some fraction of the humiliation he induced in me. I have enjoyed the inward courtroom in which I finally sat above those who stood above me in the world. This too is disordered. Not because the perception was always wrong, but because I turned judgment into compensation. The Christian demand is not blindness. It is purity in seeing. I have not had that purity. I have often seen truly and hated corruptly. 11. I turned injury into grandeur. One of the most subtle temptations in my life has been to turn suffering into distinction. There is a way of being wounded that remains humble, and there is a way of being wounded that makes a throne out of one's injuries. I know too much about the second. Every under-recognition, every betrayal, every compression, every abandonment can be interpreted not only as pain, but as evidence that one is marked, chosen for a harder path, too deep for the world that surrounds him. There is some truth in this. Some worlds do punish depth. Some institutions do elevate the smoother over the truer. Some intimacies do fail because they cannot contain the full charge of what one feels. But the temptation is to derive from this not sorrow but nobility. Then the soul begins to say, I suffer because I am more real than these others. I am unseen because I am not reducible to the categories by which they sort men. I am exiled because I bear truths that flatterers and bureaucrats cannot receive. I am lonely because the world has no home for this kind of intensity. Again, there may be elements of truth, but mixed into them is grandeur. Grandeur is one of the hardest sins to confess because it often borrows from actual injustice. It hides inside wounds. It says, because I was not seen rightly, I may now overread the meaning of my own suffering. Because I was misnamed, I may now imagine that every pain confirms my special place in the economy of truth. Because I was diminished, I may now inflate inwardly to compensate. This is poison. It makes humility impossible without first feeling like treason against one's own story. It makes ordinary obedience feel beneath one's wounds. It converts the Christian call to die into the secret ambition to remain spiritually exceptional. Lord, I have often wanted to be both victim and prophet. I wanted injury to prove my depth and prophecy to redeem my injury. I did not want merely to suffer. I wanted suffering to signify. And when it did not, when the pain remained pain and the world remained ordinary and the people around me remained unimpressed or unavailable, I became more furious than grief alone would justify. There is a humiliating freedom in admitting this. Not every pain is a crown of thorns. Some pain is simply the consequence of being a disordered man in a disordered world. If I could accept that, perhaps I would not need to keep making a chapel out of my own exclusions. 12. I used truth as a sword. When I was too hurt to love. Truth is not innocent in the hands of the wounded. I have loved truth, yes. I have wanted accuracy where others preferred smoothing, structural diagnosis where others preferred sentiment, moral clarity where others preferred the narcotic of equalized blame or managerial vagueness. These are not small things. But truth, in me, has often become sharpest exactly where I was least capable of tenderness. When I felt unseen, stolen from, bypassed, compressed, or physically lonely, I reached for truth not only to illuminate, but to defend. And once truth becomes defense, it is never merely light. It becomes blade. I have used analysis to regain altitude. I have named the mechanism in other people partly because naming the mechanism saved me from the more humiliating position of simply admitting I was hurt. If I could explain the political structure, the cowardice, the narrative theft, the civilizational weakness, the spiritual hollowness, then I did not have to remain only the one who had been wounded by it. I could stand above it. Truth would restore rank. There is some justice in this. The world needs naming, but naming is not the same as love. One may diagnose brilliantly and still remain spiritually deformed in relation to the diagnosed. I did not always want the truth for the sake of the person before me or the world's healing. Sometimes I wanted the truth because it allowed me to strike without lying. This is the secret temptation of the intelligent wounded man, to wound cleanly, to use accuracy in place of mercy, not because mercy would be false, but because mercy would leave one undefended. Better to be right than helpless. Better to be incisive than abandoned. Better to expose than to admit sorrow. Lord, I have often preferred unmasking to reconciliation because reconciliation would have required some trust that reality itself would hold me if I put down the weapon. I did not trust that. So I kept truth sharpened and called this moral seriousness. Often it was only fear armed with precision. Teach me not to abandon truth, but to cease using it as compensation for the love I do not yet know how to bear. 13. I asked language to save me. There are men who use language as ornament, and there are men who use it as shelter. I have used it as both. Writing has been, for me, one of the least shameful substitutes for God and one of the most dangerous. Because language can do so much. It can hold contradiction without panic. It can render pain proportionate. It can preserve authorship against theft, at least on the page. It can turn humiliation into form, form into witness, witness into beauty, and beauty into a tolerable arrangement beneath which one may survive another season. Language has often been my way of refusing annihilation. If I can write it, I am not gone. If I can name it, I have not been wholly taken. If I can shape it, perhaps it need not remain only raw suffering. This is why I love writing more than many of the people who flatter it understand. It is not hobby. It is not brand. It is not merely public discourse. It has often functioned as anti-collapse architecture. In a life where so much has felt unstable, appropriated, or unheld, the sentence remains one of the few places where I can still be sovereign. And yet even this can become disordered. I have asked language to do what prayer was supposed to do. I have turned to articulation before surrender, to structure before dependence, to diagnosis before trust, to publication before stillness. I have believed, secretly, that if only the sentence were sufficiently exact, the wound would close. That if only the essay could hold all the contradiction with enough elegance, I would no longer need ordinary human consolation, nor the slower humiliations of relationship with you. Language became not merely instrument, but mediation. It was the thing I trusted most to carry me across the flooded ground. Even now, this confession risks becoming a final refinement rather than an opening of the hand. There is vanity in wanting one's sin beautifully expressed. There is avoidance in making of one's kneeling another act of authorship. I know this. Yet I also know that language is one of the few gifts by which I have resisted total falsehood. So I do not want to denounce it. I want to reorder it. Lord, let language become servant again. Let it stop trying to be sacrament in itself. Let writing remain witness, not redeemer. Let the sentence no longer bear what only prayer can bear. Let authorship cease to be my refuge from obedience. Chapter 14. Even my confession wants to be beautiful. There is no pure place left in me from which to speak. Even here, in confession, some part of me wants distinction. It wants the gravity of Augustine without surrendering fully to Augustine's God. It wants the beauty of penitence without all the humiliation. It wants the readers, even if imagined, to feel that this is not common confession, but unusually intelligent confession, wounded confession, lit by history and erotic difficulty and civilizational grief. It wants to remain singular even while kneeling. This is almost funny in its persistence. Almost, but only almost, because it reveals how deep vanity runs. Not vanity in the trivial sense of wanting compliments, but vanity in the more spiritual sense of wanting one's very repentance to preserve rank. To be not merely penitent, but impressive in penitence. To arrange weakness so that it still testifies to exceptional structure. To confess in such a way that one remains admirable. What can be said to this except that I am poorer than I wanted to believe? Lord, I cannot offer you a clean confession because the need to be seen follows me even here. Some part of me still wants to be the one who tells the truth most exquisitely. Some part of me still wants the style to absolve the substance. Some part of me would rather be known as a great sinner than live as a small, obedient saint, because greatness of any kind still flatters me more than smallness with you. I bring that too. the pride that would rather dramatize its own ruin than accept an ordinary and hidden purification, the part of me that wants to be unforgettable, even in ashes, the part that fears that if I am healed quietly, I will also become less luminous, less dangerous, less interesting to myself. Take even this, or if you will not yet take it from me, at least prevent it from masquerading as sincerity. 15. I have been afraid of an unrewarded life. At the center of much of this is a fear I have not wanted to face directly, that I may be asked to live faithfully without ecstasy, without quick vindication, without clear public recognition, without a beautiful man lingering after the charged hour, without a company ever fully placing me as I imagine I should be placed, without the world offering a sufficient symbolic reward for what I endure. This fear is not only of pain, it is of ordinariness. An unrewarded life means showing up when no revelation attends the hour, remaining sober when brightness does not return on schedule, working without believing every effort will be accurately credited, loving without guaranteed proportionate return, praying without dramatic interior weather, continuing even when the soul says nothing answers me quickly enough. I have not wanted this life. I have wanted a life in which seriousness is repaid, depth is recognized, eros is answered, authorship is honored, faithfulness is accompanied by signs, and exile receives some aesthetic or spiritual compensation. I have wanted God not merely to save me, but to make the pattern legible and beautiful enough that I would not have to endure so much unadorned obscurity. But perhaps this is where discipleship begins, not in ecstatic certainty, but in the refusal to condition obedience on emotional reward. Not in being special enough that one's suffering is redeemed visibly, but in being willing to remain one more creature asked to love God and neighbor under ordinary skies. This is harder for me than many transgressions. Some men must be taught to desire more. I must be taught to endure less radiance than I've made necessary for myself. I must learn how to remain in a life that does not constantly advertise its meaning. Lord, I am afraid of an ordinary, unrewarded faithfulness because I am still too attached to the self that shines under intensity. But perhaps the life I have feared is not punishment. Perhaps it is the first life in which I would no longer need to be saved by interruption. 16. Lord, I still want relief more than I want you. Let me not become dishonest at the threshold. The clean thing would be to end by saying, now I understand, and so now I choose you above all else. But that is not true. The truer thing is more humiliating. I still want relief more than I want you. I want you partly as the one who might finally reorder what all these other loves have mangled. I want you partly because I am exhausted by my idols. I want you partly because they no longer work as they once did. I want you partly because I am scared. I want you partly because I see where these roads go. All of this may still be grace, but it is not yet the purity of first love. There are still hours when I would choose immediate consolation over sanctification, intensity over peace, beautiful flesh over unseen faithfulness, vindication over obedience, the thrilling counterfeit over the slow and humiliating medicine of grace. There are still places in me that treat you as final backup rather than first desire. I do not hide this from you because it cannot be hidden, but I confess it because I do not want to remain split forever between speech about you and appetite for what is not you. If this is where I begin, let me begin here. Not with victory, but with honest rank order. Left to myself, I still choose relief. I still want a life that hurts less before I want a life that is holy. I still want the world to become manageable before I consent to be remade. I still want transcendence without the cross. I still want resurrection without Saturday. Have mercy on this poverty. I do not know how to purify myself by force. I do not know how to make my loves right by sheer insight. I have diagnosed enough to know that diagnosis is not conversion. I have written enough to know that language is not surrender. I have suffered enough to know that suffering does not by itself sanctify. If I come at all, it must be because you receive even crooked desire and begin, by means slower than my pride enjoys, to straighten it. 17. Prayer for reordering. Lord, I bring you not a finished self, but a crowded one. I bring you the man who still mistakes intensity for aliveness, beauty for refuge, humiliation for rest, authorship for personhood, and chemical brightness for mercy. I bring you the one who sees clearly and loves crookedly. I bring you the proud, wounded child, the erotic penitent, the angry analyst, the man who wants to kneel but still wants to remain exceptional while kneeling. I bring you my disordered loves. Reorder them. Do not make me less capable of beauty, but free beauty from idolatry. Do not make me less truthful, but remove the poison from my truth. Do not make me less intense if intensity can be redeemed, but teach me not to require it in order to believe that life is real. Do not flatten my eros into respectability. Cleanse it of the lies that make degradation feel like peace. Do not take writing from me. Take from writing the burden I placed on it when I asked it to save me. Do not merely remove the counterfeit consolations. Teach me how to live long enough without them that I may one day recognize true consolation when it comes. Have mercy on my body, which has been trained by false liturgies. Have mercy on my mind, which has tried to convert every wound into grandeur. Have mercy on my work, which I have made too close to salvation. Have mercy on my longing, which has often knelt before what could not love me back. Have mercy on my fear of ordinary time. Have mercy on my dread of an unrewarded life. Have mercy on my vanity even in repentance. And if you do not heal me quickly, then keep me from mistaking delay for absence. Let me remain sober when sobriety feels like winter. Let me remain truthful when truth no longer gives me altitude. Let me remain faithful when no one sees the hidden labor. Let me remain gentle where I have learned to become sharp. Let me remain a man and not merely a nervous system searching for rescue. Teach me the kind of peace that does not need spectacle. Teach me the kind of love that does not require self-erasure. Teach me the kind of obedience that outlasts mood. Teach me the kind of prayer that does not begin only when my idols fail. And if I must be made smaller before I can be made clean, then let the smallness not terrify me. If I must lose the right to see myself as singular in order to become true, then let me lose it. If I must live for a season without the emotional wages I have demanded from life, then let me learn how to breathe there without calling it death. I do not yet know how to want you more than relief, but I want to want you. Take that poor beginning and do not despise it. Amen.